Good evening, everyone. Tonight we got a very special guest. My name is David Matney with Nebraska Realty. And tonight we're going to talk all things property management. And I got a special guest who's someone who's been in the management business for a long time. And without further ado, I'd like to bring on Melisha Potter Parks. Hey, Melisha, how you doing?
Hey David, how's it going? I'm
All
good.
right, terrific. Well, hey, thanks for being on the program tonight. And what I'd like to do is, before we get started, is kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into property management.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Melisha Potter Parks. Just got married, so I'm still getting used to the new last name. So yeah, I've been doing real estate and property management for 10 years now,
Wow.
and it was a huge emphasis on, like, when I started, the emphasis was on property management because I knew I wanted to help people that were tenants become
Right.
homeowners. So I wanted to
Okay.
meet them where they were, and I was like, what better way to do that than
Yeah.
to help them as they're renting in their renting year.
Right. Excellent. Well, that's I mean, and I've known you for quite some time, and it takes a special person to be a property manager. So
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
what what's and we got a lot of folks out there that watch the channel that are thinking about becoming landlords or investing in real estate. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see, as a property manager that you see new landlords make when they invest in real estate?
Oh man. So there's a couple of big ones. One is buying a house and not knowing what the rents would be for it. Um,
Gotcha.
I think sometimes people are like, oh, this house is so nice. It does this and
Mhm.
that. It's got all these things, but none of those appeal to renters. So
Gotcha.
it could make it where you spend a lot of money, or maybe even you maybe have saved some money by getting a house. Like, for example, a good one would be like a conversion unit. So like a
Oh yeah.
house, it was built as a house, but somebody chopped it up and made it like 5 apartments. And they're like, oh, I could make $800 on each of these units, and but
Yeah,
don't want to live in a shoebox.
I've learned the hard way on that one. A conversion duplex, as you
Yes.
know, is a painful experience because the numbers on paper are not what work out in real life.
Right.
And so I am living. If I yeah, and I told my wife, she's like, I don't want to watch tonight's stream because it'll bring up too many bad memories. But yeah, that is, if we ended the stream right now, that is a great piece of advice. Do not buy a conversion duplex. And knowing the numbers, and that's gold right there. Um,
Yes.
what what advice would you give to someone who is brand new to being a landlord?
Someone brand new, I would say, um, if possible, if it's a possibility, renting out the house that you lived in.
Okay.
So then that way you kind of have an idea of like all the different parts of the house, how to work the doors and the windows and all the good stuff.
Right.
So then when you rent it out, you've got that familiarity with it.
Hmm.
You know the perks, I can get to the interstate in 3 minutes,
Right.
from here, or I love that the park's right there, and I know, like, just
Hmm.
knowing just different parts of the house. And then also, of course, having a property manager.
Yep.
You want to have a property manager kind of just relieve the stress of, dealing with any of it, really. I always tell my
Right.
my owners, I make it so that you just sit back and collect a check. Like, let me handle everything else, and you just relax.
And Melisha managed my properties for many, many years. And
Mm.
let me tell you this: all property managers are not created equal.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've learned the hard way on that one. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's an expensive lesson to learn, because a lot of people don't realize, until it's too late, if they
Mhm.
hire the wrong manager. Yeah,
Mhm.
that is something I've learned the hard way. Thankfully, Melisha, you had to come in and kind of clean up some things.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give yourself, looking back over 10 years of experience in property management? What advice would you give yourself with 10 years in, that you would go back and say, I wish I would have known that when I started?
Yeah. So it's kind of a twofold one. So I feel like I wish I would have developed a team sooner.
Okay. Yep.
So when I first started off, it was me and I was doing everything.
Is
like
that
like
right? Wow.
literally um I used to joke around like I'd be in my business attire, skirts, heels and everything, and I'm out here trying to change a door spring on a door
Yep.
for a tenant. Like I got this, I can fix this for you, like um but as time went on, of course we got maintenance team because I can't do everything. um
Right.
and then an assistant and just a whole team. But I think the benefit of
Mhm.
me playing all the roles is now I know what it takes to
Yeah.
do every role.
Right.
So I
That's
feel like that gives me that edge. So I know, like, when it comes to leasing, when it comes to showing the houses, and if it comes to
right.
repairs or whatever, like I've done every role.
Well, and I think a lot of folks don't realize the amount of regulation, and the amount, a lot of people have this idea, they watch a 20-minute video on YouTube and they think they can flip a house, and then they can
Yep.
think they can all of a sudden, you know, be a landlord. And it sounds real easy on a late night infomercial. It's a
Right.
whole nother animal when you're in the middle of it. You know what I'm saying? I just don't think people realize how much regulations there are, and how that are involved with renting out properties. And it just seems like there's more and more, more and more folks. The MHO8, he's always fun he's a
He said, "Now I'm an
MHOA. Yeah,
expert."
I watched 3 videos, so now I'm an expert. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, this is a good question. Okay, how do I hire a property manager? How do I find the 20%? And I think what he's talking about, how there's real estate agents, and there's 80%, and then there's the 20% that are good to go. How do you find a great property manager?
I always say the best is a referral. So if you have a friend, a family member, coworker,
Yep.
where someone said, "Hey, call that person. They're the best. Like
Yep.
they're gonna take care of you." Like
Yep.
can't
No,
beat a
that
referral.
right, and that is so true, and absolutely. Can you share a little bit about maybe a story about how a landlord got over their head, like somebody that got in over their head, and you had to, uh, you
Help
know,
bail them out. Oh yeah,
yeah.
we've got a bunch of those stories. um, there was one particular one I remember. So an owner decided to rent out the house to his sister,
Oh
cousin.
boy.
I can't. I think it was sister. It was his sister.
Oh boy.
Um,
I know where
like
this
I
is going.
already knew. And he was like, at first, you're like, it's my sister. I don't really need a property manager. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm here if you need me, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, she's not paying rent and she's
Right.
da 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 da. And so then I'm like, okay, I
Right.
step in and basically be that barrier where it's like, I can't, like, for him, he was like, I got a property manager now. So, whatever she says goes, like, I don't really have
Yep.
control over it anymore. And I think
Yep.
that helped out a lot
That
because
helps out a lot.
I'm very as a property manager, I'm very strict. So,
Yeah.
and I feel like he was very lenient and
Yeah.
let her get
Yeah.
away with a lot of things. And, oh, I won't pay it this month. I got you next month or the month after, this.
Right.
But, I feel like every time someone rents to family members, it always ends up bad.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. 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 You learn that the hard way. It's just like loaning people money.
mm-hmm,
You didn't loan them that money, you gave them that money,
basically.
so you'll never see that money again, so yeah, that's a I loved having a property manager because it was like,
But like you said,
if the tenant wouldn't pay, guess what, my wife would let me know the tenant didn't pay. And
uh-huh.
yeah, and that right saved my marriage, actually. Having a property manager saved my marriage because
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it takes a special person. Hey, we got Clark in the house. All right, hey, Clark from down in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Clark, how we doing? All right, and we have I'm not sure how to say that correctly. How do we say
I think
that?
you pronounce it like a Z.
Hi
Zarinka.
again, Dave. Okay. All right, hello. All right, and then let's see. Um, all right. In your when we talked about um, what properties to avoid, like a conversion duplex or conversion where they chop it into apartments. In your opinion, what type of properties make the best investments in Omaha, Nebraska?
The best investments are ones where either they're already like move-in ready,
Yeah.
where they're like everything's done already, or whoever's buying it has the ability to make them really nice inside. Tenants are very drawn to clean, remodeled, updated houses. Typically, like if I had to for Omaha, if I had to pick like the quintessential home, would probably be like a 3-bedroom home that has 2 bathrooms, because
Okay.
that's another thing, they like multiple bathrooms.
Yeah.
A garage, and is in just like I would say a part that is of the city that's easily accessible. So not too far out one way or the other, like
Right.
somewhat centrally located tend
Right.
to be the top ones.
Gotcha. And I remember that, when I was first starting investing, I was buying 2 bedrooms because that's what was in my budget at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute I bought a 3 bedroom with 2 bath, boy, that puppy rented almost instantaneously.
Yep.
But it was it took me a little bit longer to learn that, but and it was just, these were back in the day when things were, 30,000 and 45,000 and things like that. And then I remember I went up to 60,000 and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money, but I should have bought 100 of them. I should have bought 100 of those.
Right.
All right, that's great advice. Now, what are some of the costs involved in if somebody wants to hire a property manager? Okay, what's the and there's everything's negotiable, of course, but I mean, what's kind of like your typical? What do you see as kind of a not a standard, but what do you see as some of the rates involved, or if you don't mind sharing something like that?
Yeah. No
What does
problem.
it cost?
Yeah. So usually, so if a property is empty and you need to fill it, there's a leasing fee.
Okay.
For that, leasing fee is usually about 50% of the rent.
Okay.
Whatever the end rent is going to be, 50% of that is to find the tenant, create the lease, do all the showings, the marketing, that kind of thing. And then to manage the property thereafter is typically around 10%.
Gotcha. Which I think is a bargain compared to doing it yourself, because you're on call 24/7. It's like there is no time. There is no time off. Time off. I loved having a property manager. That was such a relief because I can hand it off to you, and then now when you called me, I'll admit
You're scared every time. Like, what happened?
I'm like, okay, we're over $500, and it's like, okay, did anybody get hurt?
Right.
It's like, as long as nobody got hurt, okay, we can work through the rest of it. But it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm like, I would call you up, and I would see your number, and I'm like, okay,
Right. What happened?
what is Melisha gonna? Oh, but it was so nice. I don't think people. I was an investor for 32 years, and I don't think people understand when I handed that off. And I grew up. My dad was a real estate investor, so I grew up inside of it, and he was just adamantly opposed. He wanted to manage himself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you what, it's such a relief to have that help. And I think it makes you more because you have a subject matter expert that know. Because I don't think people know all of the pitfalls and some of the traps that are involved with
yes,
and the rules and the regulations, and they're not familiar with fair housing like they should be, and
exactly.
they just don't know the regulations. And there's so much more that people don't get about it. And I'm like, when they talk to me, I think you should start out right from the gate with a property manager. I just think you're gonna save yourself a whole. It costs a little bit more, yes, and you know what? Here's the other thing too, Melisha. Guess what? I think you made me money because sometimes you would say to me, "Well, we're getting that for that," and I'm like, "What?"
We can bump that rent up.
I was like,
You're a very nice landlord. So I can see if you did not have a property manager, they would just walk all over
they
you.
walked it said welcome across my forehead because, and it's like, it would be like their 7th time the grandma died. Oh, I'm going to be late. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I would go home and get yelled at from my wife. And then I'm like, I loved it when I had a property manager. I did. It takes a special but you were the hammer, and I loved it because it's like, hey, and then you give me that rent, and I'm like, good Lord, are you kidding? I felt kind of guilty, because I'm like, it's like that means
I'm getting paid to chill out.
Because I'm like, okay, here we go. Clark says, does the property manager have any input in setting a rent? And for me, yes, because guess what? Her rent was higher than my rent. So I'm like, but I'm sure you're going to have some. I was probably, I'm sure you get the people on scales. Like, you're going to have somebody that like me that's like, hey, go with it, and then you're going to have other people that are just microscopically managing things. Correct.
And then there's some owners that have very over thinking what the rents will be for a house, where
is that right?
I'll tell them, I always give my recommendation on it first and say, hey, I think this is our sweet spot. This will get us to rent it quickly. It's fair, that's where it's at. And if an owner wants to go 300, 400, 500 higher, it's gonna sit. You got to be prepared for getting attention.
My dad, he his rents were so low that the tenants they never called him, and I would even say, now get this, Melisha, ready for this one? I would tell my dad, I'm like, Dad, your rent is way too low on that thing. Now, if I'm telling my dad it's way too low, and I was low on rent, it was really low.
Just imagine.
And he would rent to generations, and they wouldn't move, and they loved renting from my dad.
Of course, I would love $200 a month rent too.
So. Some of them were, and this was not that long. As you get older, time goes by a little bit quicker. But to answer, that's a great question, MH08. But yeah, they. Okay, Bob is in the house. Curious, what, if any, issues, miscommunications have you experienced with property owners once you have taken over managing property, and how easy were these issues to resolve? Any pitfalls to avoid? Great question.
That is. Have you experienced any property owners? So just is it with the is I guess is the question saying like with the owner specifically or just period?
I think one thing that you and I did when we got together, okay, after I had my bad experience, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we sat down and went to lunch and we went through and kind of said, okay, here are the properties, what you want to do. You sat down with me and we talked
Mm-hmm.
about it. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is, my team. That's how you did it. And he was very
Yeah.
organized about it. And I was thrilled about that because I hired someone before and I think they must have had too many properties under management and
Mm,
they didn't have the right crews involved because you have to have the right connections to get the right
that's
crews
true.
out there.
Yeah.
And it was it was I think there you got to look at that contract too, the management contract,
Yeah, for sure.
and look what's in there and who's responsible for what,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got to have that discussions before you sign it and up front about it. Correct?
Yes,
Yeah. Is
absolutely.
that kind of what you're looking at, Bob? Does that answer your question? I mean,
Yeah, but I think that's a good point, like how you were saying that maybe they had a bad experience in the past and like, hey, I don't want this to happen again.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I just looked at it as, a lot of times I looked when something bad happened. Usually, and this was just, on a, I should have done a better job when I hired my property manager. So I learned from it the next time I hired,
yeah.
when we started, I'm like, okay, I don't want that experience again. So,
There was, and actually this kind of brings up another story. This question brings up another story I had with an owner. He was we had managed properties at his properties before, but
mhm.
then the tenant moved out and we had a new tenant coming in. But he had kind of like a, not like necessarily a relationship, but like they met before.
All
And
right.
um she was giving him like money on the side. And
Okay.
this is a situation where it's like with Section 8,
Yeah,
and
okay.
where you
Yeah.
can't give money on the side, you can't
Right.
do any of that. um and it came to find out that he was doing that. And then when the tenant, how it came up is because the tenant got mad about something, and
Yeah.
she was like, I gave him this much
Ooh.
money for that. And I'm like, you did what? Like,
Oh boy. Yeah.
they called the owner and like, did you do that? And it's like, oh, but she said it was for whatever.
Yeah.
So
I I loved it because I mean I loved it because I never met my tenants.
that's the best way.
I
Honestly,
loved it
it's
because
the
it's like,
best way.
you know, before when I was managing myself, occasionally I'd run into my tenant. It was kind of, it's like, or whatever. And it was
Yeah.
kind of awkward, but I mean, they were at work, thankfully. Okay. Keep working.
Yeah.
But I didn't like them coming over to my house. I didn't like them, I, I liked it better. Not knowing who they were, and it's just
Hmm.
like the check just appeared in my account,
Yeah.
and occasionally you would call me and I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
this is great. Now a
Yeah.
couple times you've called me and it's like, oh boy, this is it's like this ain't gonna be fun.
Right. We've had those. We've had those. But yeah, I think it's best to not know the
Yeah.
tenants, not talk to them. This day in technology, it's easy to find out who owns a property. So
Right.
even I recommend creating like an LLC so that they can't,
Yeah.
your name is not attached to the property at all.
Yeah.
Because I've got owners that they get phone calls from tenants because they used to
Oh,
self manage or
right. Oh
um,
yeah. And I had that before I hired you. I would get tenants coming back to me because they're like, well, you never charged me this. You didn't charge me a late fee,
yeah,
and I'm like, it's like, hey, I just, hey, I
yeah.
gotta, this is
I got a
their
property
rules.
manager.
It's like, hey,
Yep.
But by the time I hired you, I had none of that. They
Yeah.
didn't contact me at all, and I loved it.
And
So
we're very strict with that transition too. So like if someone did try it themselves, realize it's too much and want to hire us to manage it, we're very strict with like this is the process that you have to follow. There's no more calling the owner. They're not going to answer your calls, so don't call them.
right.
You this is how you make a maintenance request. This is what you do if you have questions about your rent or anything. Like it's very structured.
Well, and I think the other thing too that people don't realize is that you and I were a team.
Yeah.
We could bounce things off of where you would give me an idea and then I would say, well, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me another perspective on things to say, oh, hey, let's do it that way. I like
Yeah.
that idea. And it's like,
Yep.
you're in it every day. It's just like when you would suggest a rent. And I was like, you're in it every day. You're in so many houses,
Mm-hmm.
what's renting and what's not. So when you
Yeah.
pin that rent and you can get it, I'm like, and like I said, the amount more that we got for rent more than paid your fee. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like when somebody does a for sale by owner.
Mm-hmm.
You're going
Yep.
to get more money hiring, and it's counterintuitive. You don't think you're going to, but I got more money hiring a property manager than I would because you got those late fees
Mm-hmm.
it's like, hey, boom, wait, I just liked it because I could, yeah, and I was way too nice, and then that caused a lot of issues at home. We can talk about that, but and when I
Yeah.
told my wife I was having you on as a guest, she's like, I'm not going to watch that episode because one time we were talking, I had Paul Vacheski on as a guest, and I was telling something that happened with one of our rentals, and it was kind of funny. Now that I look back at it, at the time it wasn't that funny, and she's
Yeah.
like, "There's nothing funny about that." It almost, and it's like, honey, that was 10 years ago. Why,
Right.
it's okay. We can look back. It's all
We can
right.
move
Yeah.
on. You got
But it
through
wasn't. Yeah. So yeah, all right, Emma, wait, so that's funny about your dad. I also had a landlord with low rent who never heard from. Instead of calling and waiting to get something done, I just do it myself. Yep, that's yep, no, yep. And then okay, and then let's see. Clark says, okay, this is a great question. Do you see a lot of subleasing when managing other people's property?
So we have in the lease, a strict no subleasing policy.
Yeah,
The problem with subleasing is if let's just say you rent your house out to someone else and that person doesn't want to leave or they don't want to pay,
right,
then you're stuck with having to try to figure out how to get rid of them. But if
right.
there's no lease that shows that person is in charge of it, it's going to be very hard as you as a property owner to get
Oh,
the subleasee out. So
yeah, because
we're
I bet you. Oh, God, sorry.
I was
No,
going to say we're very strict on no subleasing.
yeah, I mean, because I bet you when Airbnb first took hold, there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of people that says, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to rent this out, and then I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
sublease it."
Yep.
And I bet you that occurred quite a. You know what? Probably looking back, probably before I had a property manager, probably were doing it at my house.
Okay.
I don't know, but I don't
Until you're
know, but
looking for one and you say, "Hold up, that
yeah,
looks
like,
familiar."
oh, yeah, um, yeah, you never want to see um, your property on the news.
That's true.
you know,
That's true.
you don't want to see your property on the news. Okay, Bob says, any issues with managing rental units where tenants have different versions of leases and items covered due to length the tenancy? Good question.
So one thing I do with ones that I bring in or like they come in, like I didn't place the tenants, they're transfer tenants,
Okay.
is create a new lease for them. And so the new lease will say kind of basically the key terms of whatever the original lease was. Like say if the rent's a certain amount, late fee certain amount, um, things like that, just so that there's a clear picture. Especially this happens a lot when you buy a property and a tenant lives in it already. It was a rental
Right.
property and you buy it. Um, Still giving all the key, like I said, the key term, but just
Hmm.
creating a new one that is with your
Yeah.
standards.
That way, yeah, I can believe that makes sense. That makes okay. Bob clarifies that due to length. Yeah, no, that's um,
Yeah, a lot of times too, what happens with those ones is like maybe they didn't get a renewal, so they're still like on their old lease and it's just continued month to month.
right.
And then maybe there was like a verbal, okay, you're gonna pay $100
Oh,
more this year, and but the lease still shows, the original amount. So we always
right.
just create a new lease, and that's what's
Now,
yeah.
what are some of the local rules and regulations investors should know about in the Omaha market or in the Omaha area?
Yeah,
Anything locally that's specific just for Omaha. I know you got to register the properties. Kind of talk a little bit about that and that
yeah.
sort of thing.
So the rental registry, it's been created. It's to protect the tenants and homeowners too. It's really supposed to help both, but
Hmm.
um, make sure that the tenants are being provided a safe house to live.
Right.
So when you register property, anything in Douglas County
Hmm.
must be registered. There's
Okay.
a website that you go to, and you register it. And then what happens next is an inspector comes out and inspects the property. Um,
Okay.
they're looking for making sure you have smoke detectors. Like one
Hmm.
law, a lot of people don't know,
Okay.
is that the smoke detectors now they can't have removable batteries. They have to be
Oh,
the battery has to be like a 10-year battery hard
okay.
into it or a hardwire smoke detector.
Okay. That's good to know. Yes.
Yes. So they're checking for that when they do the inspection. They're checking to see like if anything broken, if there's moldy walls, just
Right.
general health and safety type of checks.
Well,
Um,
and that protects the landlord too,
exactly.
because if somebody, yeah, people don't think long term on things until you do this long enough. Then you're like, hey, there's a
Hmm.
reason. And I'm sure there's folks out there that try to skirt things, but when you try to skirt things, that comes back to haunt you. You
Yeah.
know. You
And
know.
then if you pass, like say they come through, they look at the house, they see that everything's great, then they won't come back for another 10 years.
Okay. Okay.
But if they go there, they notice things are wrong, they'll give you some time to get it fixed.
Gotcha.
Um, but then they'll come back next year,
Hmm.
um, until you have an inspection where they don't find anything and everything's good. Then you're on a 10-year cycle.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And that was the one thing I liked about when I had properties under Section 8. You know, sometimes the Section 8 folks would nitpick you on things, but a lot of times it was just health and safety issues and just good
Yeah, stuff
maintenance
that
thing.
you'd
And it's
want to
like,
make sure is done anyway.
it's like you got to get that stuff done anyway. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Yeah, that's um, oh, this is MAOH says, or you see a property on a YouTube video. You know what it. Yeah, that. Oh, this one's. I got a story with this one. Okay, any experience with drug labs? Just had a house across the street raided.
OMG. Wow. Um, Drug lab. I've not had any of those. Uh, we've had situations where maybe people had a situation where they were doing drugs or something in that
Right.
effect.
Oh yeah.
Um, but of course, it's just it depends on the situation, of course. But most of the time, if we find out about it, it's because someone within the household has said something. So then it's a matter of just calling the police and letting the
Right.
police handle it.
I uh I had you remember, I don't know if you have so many properties. I say, oh, remember Larimore? Anyway, I had a house on Larimore, but that house, okay, uh, this was before you was property manager, okay.
Okay.
um, I got what, they weren't paying their rent, and you know they vacated the house. I had to evict them the whole 10 yards.
Yeah.
And then and I they had, you know, she was only there for 4 months, but she tore the vents out of the wall, the air vents, the
Mm-hmm.
return vents out of the wall. And I said to my friend, I said, she took the air vents out of the walls. Why would they do that? And he goes, "Oh, Dave, that's when they're on meth. They think people are coming after them." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." And so I called the police because she stole my stove, my refrigerator, my washer and dryer, and
Oh,
everything. She cleaned it all out. And I
yeah.
filed a lawsuit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who called me? The Judge Mathis show called me.
Oh,
And they
really?
said, yes. They said, would fly us out to Chicago and put us up in a hotel and we'd be on the show and they'd pay us each $5,000. Okay. And I'm like, hey, this is great. And they contacted my tenant and she's like, well, yeah, I stole his stuff. And then they called me back and said, well, we won't put you on the show because she just admitted she stole your stuff. And I never seen, but it was I was it's like, like I said, I thought it was kind of funny. My wife didn't think it was funny. I hope she's not watching this, but I thought it'd be fun to go to the Judge Mathis show.
I would have
I thought
too.
oh, that'd be great, but the
But
fact
I
that she
guess if
did,
they admit it before the show, then it's like, oh well.
yeah. And then there was, I had this same house. And finally, I said to myself, you know, maybe it's time to sell this house.
Is it the house that's
Because I go up to the house and it needs to be mowed, right? And I'm like, I had my phone to my son. I'm like, I'm going inside. If you hear anything, call the police and run. Don't come after. And when I'm like giving him that brief before going in the house, I'm like, maybe it's time to sell this thing. But I didn't have, you know what? I it was a 2-bedroom too. Go figure. But I should have. I mean, that was a thing called a lesson. That was tuition in the school of stupidity. The minute I bought that house, I lost money the minute I bought that house, and that was
Oh man.
a learning mistake. But yeah, Zarina said that's scary. And
Yeah, it
then
is.
let's see, no experience as a credit figure screening. Yeah, that Clark says, oh no. Okay, let's see here. Bob says, assuming you have a core staff of trades or who service properties, wondering if there's any issues with owner on cost of repairs, e.g., the owner thinks the repair cost was higher than thought.
Yeah, so that's a great question because when there are repairs that are needed, this kind of helps on the extreme side filter out the slumlords, quote unquote slumlords, where they don't want to spend so much money on a repair,
Right,
so they want to slap a band-aid on it. And
right.
so I do have a whole team of people, whether it's electricians, plumbers, HVAC, you name it, they're all on the team. And so they've been vetted, they've been have a history with us, and they're able to give us the best pricing because of the number of properties that we do.
Right.
And then also just because they're well-known names within the
Right.
industry, not like
I thought,
not to say that those ones where you're like,
no, no, I know what you're
no,
talking about.
yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean, you would run a price by me, and I'm like, that sounds pretty good. Go for it.
Yeah.
I thought the prices were more than reasonable, and like you said, that's because you operate on volume, and also they're going to be more. They're going to put you at the top of the list
Exactly that.
versus, because when that tenant doesn't have AC, guess what? And it's 100 degrees out, they need to be taken care of. So
Yes.
I loved it because I thought, in a couple of properties we got ready to sell, and I just let you and your crew run with it. And I'm like, I just wrote the check, and I'm like, man, that was the easiest fix.
Yeah.
I should rent from myself.
Yeah. And it's an underestimated part of having a property manager, is knowing that, like, of course, you can say I can do it myself, but yeah, like you said, like if you want a plumber to come out today, you've got to have some kind of relationship with plumbers that are willing to be like, you know what, I'm gonna do it because you called me. I'm gonna come out there now. And that's the kind of relationship I have with all of my vendors. So emergencies get taken care of quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that just goes back to good service, you know, and that's, I thought that was a bonus because like I said, you're like, you would give me an estimate on things and I'm like, wow, you know, on the last one we turned over to sell, I'm like, man, you really got that thing dolled up great. I'm like, man,
and most of the time I'm vetting it before you get it anyways. So if I look at it, I'm like, okay, this doesn't look right. Let's redo this. Or this is including, like, for example, a carpet replacement or something. It's including pad. We don't need new pad. So let's try again. Give me another one. And then by the time it gets to you, it's already been vetted through me and my team. And we've already, said this is a good number that we feel is comfortable.
Yeah. Clark has another question here. How often would you say a property management company should drive by to check on a house? That's a good question.
So for me personally, drive-by inspections are extra. It's an additional charge to do that. We do have where in our management contract, if you want us to come to a property and just do like an inspection where we go inside, outside, walk it, make sure they're doing everything, you can pick as many of those as you want. Typically it's only one a year, at most maybe twice a year. But drive-bys, unless it's like, that's why I don't have a centrally located house, because unless it's somewhere that you drive all the time.
And here's the other thing, that nobody loves your money more than you do. You know what I'm saying? So, now sometimes, I would put into my schedule, okay, I'm going to drive by once a week. And then sometimes it's like, sometimes you drive by and you're going to see things that irritate, you got to let go to some extent. Because, if somebody when you fix a property up and it looks beautiful, you have to go in with the assumption. Now, this is the way my thought process was. Is it's never going to look like that again. They're going to be a little bit harder on it. There's going to be things they do, my favorite was always I'm babysitting my sister's dog.
Oh yeah.
My sister is out of town and I'm babysitting my neighbor, I'm like, you're babysitting two dogs,
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, and they tell you things and you're like, oh yeah, right.
Right.
But that's Clark has another question here. I might have missed it, but how often do you run background checks on applicants? What systems do you use to vet them? That's a great question.
So we do background checks on every tenant, every applicant that applies. They get a background check. The systems that we use is tenant data.
Yep.
And actually, you know what? You're the reason why I switched to tenant data. You already know why. I used to use a different system.
Yeah.
And I used to do it more of a local, like very local district, like a criminal background.
Right.
But now with tenant data, it goes all the states.
Yeah.
And it does eviction history. It does, any other traffic, any violations. It shows up on there.
Yeah, I'm glad I could be of assistance.
Yeah. See, look.
Let's see. Okay, that's how do you stay current with all the changing laws and everything?
So, just the relationship. So like I said, when we have inspections, the inspector, I have a relationship with all the inspectors of the city, whether it's a Section 8 inspector, a city inspector, even the utility companies. Like they recognize me, I know them, and we get updated on them from them, like, oh, did you know this is coming? Like, we knew about the smoke detectors about a year before it was really initiated.
Is that right? Yeah.
So that we can start kind of prepping for it. And then I stay like abreast on current events going on within, like we've got different things in legislature right now, the bills passing that are affecting landlords.
And it seems like there's a lot of them down there at the courthouse, but in the legislature, it seems like there's a lot. I follow Paul Vacheski, and he seems to. I mean, he's always putting out stuff where there's, and it's like if you're not in tune with that, and something goes south, you're gonna get hammered.
Yes.
And that's.
And it doesn't hurt too that I've got a couple of attorney friends too. So when it comes to new laws as well, they're keeping me abreast of anything like that as well. So
Gotcha. Let's see. What's probably your craziest or the anonymously, what would you say would be your craziest story or nightmare, or maybe it was mine. I don't know. What would you say is your craziest, like you're like, I cannot believe that? What would be your craziest story?
So I had a situation happen. The first one that's coming to my head right now. I was showing a house to someone, and there were people already in it.
Okay.
That were not supposed to be.
Right.
It was supposed to be an empty house.
Right.
And I had some clients that are, like showing them the house, and I'm like, who are you? Like, what are you guys doing here? They were like, yeah, we're working with the owner directly. They told us they're not working with you anymore. And they just let us rent the house instead. And I'm like, I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
So no. I call the police, of course.
Right.
And tell them, long story short, the tenants that were the people, I call them tenants, they weren't tenants, they were trespassers.
Right.
Were told they saw the house on Craigslist. So this was back in the Craigslist days.
Oh yeah.
They saw it on Craigslist, and they the person that owned it told them that, you wire me some money, I'll tell you can go into the house. And I was like, well, how did you get a key? Like, how did you even get inside? They told him, you could just go in and break the window in the back of the house. The keys are in, you can, so that way you can have access inside. I just don't have a key right now. Like, in their mind, they thought that was okay. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're crying to the police like, I wired them, $1,000, and I'm thinking, like, this house rents for way more than $1,000. That should have been the first red flag.
Right. Because I mean that was that. I remember that they would scrape your listing as a, when it was listed for sale, and then you would get calls from people saying, hey, I'm interested in renting it. And I'm like, it's not for rent. And that was, I remember those days. That was craziness. Yeah, that was.
Luckily now, and I always tell people too, like, verify who you're talking to.
Right.
Don't just someone claiming to be the owner. Make sure. And that's another reason why you'd want to work with someone that's a property manager, because that's a safer transaction for your tenants. So you're not running into tenants that, they said squatters. I have a squatter story.
Okay, let's hear it. Let's
So I had a property, another one, where it's like, I'm trying to show the house. There was a kitchen island.
Okay.
And all the windows were open. Like, they didn't have blinds in that house. So this was one where I was showing it. It was in my early days. So I was showing the house for another agent.
Okay.
And so I'm knocking on the door because I saw like some movement, and then the guy kind of like hid behind the island.
Okay.
So then I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm knocking on the door, like, hello,
Yeah.
So then I call the agent. I'm like, hey, yeah, it looks like the owner's here, but he's like not coming to the door. She's like, the owner lives in Texas. Okay. I was like, oh no, somebody's in this house.
Right.
Come to find out that was a squatter situation, and the police came.
Yeah.
And yeah,
that
I've seen squatters in properties that, yeah, it's crazy.
right, right.
It,
Yeah,
that one for sure wasn't as bad as some of the other squatters. That one, they just, had some stuff. It wasn't nasty, but there's some squatter stories where like they just
yeah,
decided not to use the toilet as the bathroom. They wanted to use the
right.
living room as the
Wow, isn't
bathroom.
that amazing? Isn't that amazing? I mean,
So
people
yeah.
have people have no idea. It's like sometimes when you know, um, and I'm sure you become. I mean, uh, when you're a brand new landlord,
Yeah.
you don't you get so excited and so bent out of shape over just a little bit of
Hmm.
damaging stuff, and you're like you don't even realize what could happen. And
Yeah.
then as time goes on, it's like nothing shocks you. You're like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's Bob says, does Nebraska allow pass-through costs to tenants if so, are they capped at a percentage? Is there a software program available to property management pros to help them track and manage these?
So pass through costs, are they talking uh like late fees, or is
Damage?
it like fees like if it takes so much money to run a credit check type of thing? Guess what it would have. Bob, what do you mean by pass through costs?
Yeah, if he's still in the chat there.
I
Uh,
know there are. That's one of the things that's in legislature.
oh, water bills, utility, things like that.
Oh, so usually 9 times out of 10, we make tenants pay their own utilities. So
Okay.
there's no it just makes it easier. And that's
Yeah,
another reason why I don't really like conversions, because it's hard to say, you pay your own utilities when everybody's sharing utilities. So
gotcha. Okay. He also said improvement cost to buildings. Like, are you talking like if there was damage? If they damage the property?
so if that is the case, if
Bonds?
but if but going back to that one where like the
Okay.
property, if there's damage to the property, um you can really charge what you want as within reason
Mhm.
of what the repair is. So like, for example, if it to paint walls or to install blinds,
Right.
there's you can't say, oh, I spent 50,000 on blinds.
Right.
um but like for your time or the contractor's time to install those things, it's everybody has different fees on what they charge to install blinds. So if this contractor charges whatever to install it, we pass that through to the
And,
tenant to take out of their deposit.
and I think at some extent you got to. I always figured, hey, you're always going to have at least one of your properties heading south, no matter what. There's always going to be one that's like, okay, that's the. Hopefully, it's not the only one you have,
Yeah.
but there's always going to be. It's it's a learning process, and it's not something that. And sometimes there's going to be damage, and if you're going to get that worked up over it, then you maybe shouldn't be a landlord,
Yeah,
right?
I
I
always tell you
mean,
it's good to have reserves just in
yeah,
case those things happen and that it's not
right.
break the bank.
I'm a big believer in living within your means that way. Because
Hmm.
I always figured, okay, when somebody called up and they needed I had to replace a furnace, I had to have that money on hand to do that stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, yeah, no, let's see what Bob says. No, I'm here in California Bay Area. Pass through costs are allowed for, say, seismic upgrades, water bonds, and additional charges are allowed to be passed through, but are capped. Okay.
Mm. So we don't. Luckily, we don't have any seismic stuff
Right.
here. Um, but and we
Huh.
don't have any like caps either, right?
Right.
At this point. Um,
Right.
so
Well, and then here's the other thing too. Good luck trying to, you know, get money from people.
Yeah, that part.
You know, I mean, you can get awarded the money, but guess what? That doesn't mean you're going to get it. You know,
Exactly.
so sometimes it's, um, and that goes back to where my dad was kind of like, sometimes it's better to have a little bit lower rent and have a longer term tenant, and you're not making as much money, but if you have a good person in there, that's worth something.
Yeah,
And if you
consistent
dro-
cash flow.
and then if you drive by and maybe the grass, they're busy, they're those folks are struggling. Maybe their grass isn't looking perfect. That's okay. If as long as they're paying the rent and the house isn't completely destroyed,
Yeah.
it's like it's not going to be. You got to let go of stuff. And if you're going to get worked up over, some things, then maybe you shouldn't be a landlord. But a lot of those folks are it's tough enough in this world to survive with the way everything costs nowadays.
Yeah.
So, and his also mindset was kind of like, it's either I pay the government, it's either, even if they pay more in rent, I'm going to pay the government anyway. So he
That's
was like,
true.
if I get a tenant in there that stays and doesn't give me any grief, then, um, so that to me, looking back, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty smart of him on that, because it's like, then that
Hmm.
way it doesn't go crazy. Kyle has a question here. Kyle, weeds can be killed and grass grows back. Amen. Exactly. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Or
true.
the grass can get killed by the dog who's being babysat.
Right?
Well, and then nowadays everything is the talk about, if you got a moment to talk about, emotional support animals,
Hmm.
because that's a big deal now. Says,
Yeah.
this is my emotional support chicken or snake or alligator and that sort of thing. And you got to allow that if that's the case, if they have the documentation for that, right? Or if they,
To a certain extent. So yeah, they if they have an emotional support animal, they have to have the paperwork, has to be so an important thing too is you can't ask them what their disability is. You
okay,
have to but they have to have a letter that shows that this is and from a doctor.
yeah,
Um, unfortunately, people have tried to do the online where you can be like, oh, just put this in and
right, yeah,
we can
there's,
catch all of that. We can catch it. Don't try it because we already know about it.
um,
But there's limits to what it is because, like, if somebody say like they have a pig,
right,
you can't say a pig is your emotional support animal and I have to allow this pig in your house.
right,
There's
right,
limits to it. So
right. That's um, now let me ask you this: if you were to hire a property manager in a, let's say you didn't have anybody in another state,
uh-huh.
you needed to hire a property manager, what questions would you ask that property manager?
So I would ask them one, how many properties do they manage, and what does their team look like?
Gotcha.
Who do I report like talk to?
Hmm.
Who will I be talking to? Who is in charge of like what's the process of if the toilet breaks? What happens in that? What's the process?
Okay.
Um, so that way you're familiar when if it does happen, you're like, okay, I know. Like some places have it where if it's under a certain dollar amount, they just fix it. If
Gotcha.
it's over a certain dollar amount, then they
Right.
get approval or a couple of bids or just whatever
Hmm.
the process is. I'd be very familiar with um, how they operate in that aspect.
Gotcha. Yep.
And
Yep.
then another thing to keep in mind is um, how long have they been in company or in business? Because, like you said, it comes with experience that if it's a new company, um, you know, if at least the person has years of experience, maybe
Right.
then that can offset the fact that the company is new.
Yep.
But yeah,
Now, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you for property management services, what's the best way to reach at?
yes. So the best way is to go to either email, calls, um, the website should have some ways where you can reach and get in contact with me. But I say the best way would be email.
Okay.
It's just mpotter@npdodge.com.
All right. It's in my memory of my email. So
Just start right, type it in, it comes up.
and they got you the rentitmanagement.com will get you to
Yes.
your management site. All
Yeah.
right. Any other parting words of wisdom, Melisha, that you can think of that people need to know with their going to go into the world of property management or investments?
That this it's really a team thing. Like, it's a partnership.
Yep.
Whether you are on your first one or you're thinking about, adding more to your portfolio, that it's a partnership, and like we work together, we like can make it so that if you want to buy more
Yeah.
properties, I can help you with that whole process. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not just finding a tenant for your property and making sure they're paying the rent on time. It's also
Right.
about investment and securing the future for yourself, your family, generations to come.
Because you can help an investor buy a property, and then
Yes.
they could, if they hire somebody that is in property management, you can say, yeah, you don't want to buy this one because of this, correct?
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's a feather in your cap right there. So
It is.
folks can reach out to you. Here's your cell phone number there, or
Yes.
maybe I shouldn't give that out. But if they have a property management question, or if they're looking for investment properties in Omaha and that sort of thing, sort of thing. But Melisha, I tell you what, I really appreciate you being on tonight's program. And I think we got one more comment here. Let's see. Clark says, "Good show tonight, David."
There you go.
Thank you, Clark. Thank you. Well, I had a great guest, so it's a team effort. But Melisha, I tell you what, I really appreciate you being on tonight's program.
Yeah.
It's been fun to work with you for many years. I
Yeah.
kind of like not getting your calls anymore. I like calling you because it's like, no, but you did a great job. So I really want to thank you for that. So I really appreciate that. And thank you for being on the program. So,
No
and
problem.
if folks want to reach out to you, they can head out to your website and get in touch with you. But all right, you have a great day. You take it easy. Thanks again.
Thank you. See you later.
All right, everybody. Well, I tell you what, let's see. All right, terrific. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody tonight. I don't know who's going to be on next week, but we'll have another program next week. And I want to thank everybody for tonight. And don't forget, please give the thumb stream a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. This April marks 5 years of being on YouTube. So it's my 5-year anniversary for having the channel. So it's been a lot of fun. So please subscribe to my channel. So I appreciate that. But anyway, folks, I really appreciate it. And okay, let me get that banner down. Let's see here. Try and get all these. All right. Well, anyway, you have a great night. And thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.